The great crystalline spire of the Cygnian hegemony, the Archon's pinnacle, pierced the perpetual twilight of Xylo's prime, its facets catching the cold, distant light of the binary suns, and scattering it into shimmering, oppressive geometries across the grand convocation hall. Along the vast, curved obsidian table, where the light failed to penetrate the depths of the polished stone, the assembled voices of the 13 ascendant houses resonated with a low, vibrating frequency, a symphony of barely contained apprehension. Before them, suspended in a field of shimmering stasis energy, floated the data schematic of the anomaly, the source of the current, profound instability. Sol 3, designated by the hegemony's cartographers as the Terran seed world. The air was thick with the scent of ionized ozone and the subtle, metallic tang of heightened political anxiety. Speaker Valerius, representing the ancient, conservative house of Scriptorium, adjusted the subtle bioluminescent frills around his cranial ridges, his multiple visual orbs narrowed to pinpricks of suspicious amber. "The projections remain inadequate," Valerius articulated, his voice a dry rasp amplified by the hall's acoustic baffling. "The preliminary deep scan probes returned anomalous energy signatures that defy categorization within the established boundaries of Type 0, or even recognized Type 1 development matrices. Their energetic output fluctuates wildly, lacking the necessary spectral coherence for a species claiming interstellar reach. They are, by all quantifiable metrics, a localized, volatile phenomenon masquerading as a polity." He shifted his weight, the armored plates beneath his ceremonial vestments clicking softly, a sound that echoed too loudly in the tense silence that followed. The hegemony valued predictability above all else. Uncertainty was the precursor to entropy, and entropy was the ultimate political failure. Across the table, the representative of the burgeoning mercantile guild, Ambassador Livia of the Outer Vales, leaned forward, her silhouette sharp against the ambient glow. Livia was known for her aggressive pragmatism, a necessary trait in managing the hegemony's complex web of resource acquisition. Inadequate projections, speaker, or perhaps simply a reflection of their current perceived state, the Terrans have breached the established quarantine perimeter. They have utilized faster-than-light displacement technology, crude, yes, relying on massive external impulse drives rather than integrated warp matrices, but undeniably functional. To dismiss them as mere localized volatility is to invite the very instability we seek to manage. They are a variable we did not account for in the great calculus of the outer rim. Livia's tone suggested that Valerius's caution was merely the stubbornness of obsolescence. The true authority in the chamber, the appointed first consul, Xarthus, remained silent, a towering, multifaceted silhouette whose true expressions were known only to the few who had access to his personal cognitive projections. Xarthus's species, the dominant architects of the hegemony, viewed the universe through the lens of systemic optimization. This Terran intrusion represented a significant deviation from the expected polynomial progression of galactic emergence. He permitted a long, measured pause, letting the friction between the houses build, observing the necessary friction before applying directive force. "Their primary vessel," Xarthus finally intoned, his voice a deep, resonant harmonic that seemed to originate from the very foundations of the spire, "was intercepted 40 cycles ago near the Lagrange point of the designated buffer zone. It possessed minimal defensive capabilities, relying primarily on energy dispersion shielding calibrated for localized stellar radiation, not engagement. Yet, when our Guardian detachment initiated standard hailing protocols, the three-phase mathematical challenge, the Terran vessel did not respond with recognized galactic signifiers, nor did it exhibit the expected panic response of a fledgling species encountering established power." A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. The three-phase challenge was designed not merely for communication, but as a stress test, a universal measure of cognitive function under duress. Failure to respond correctly usually signified immediate surrender, cognitive collapse, or immediate hostile aggression. Valerius seized the opening. "Precisely. An absence of protocol suggests either profound incompetence or active deception. Their ships are demonstrably inferior in propulsion and shielding metrics. Their recorded physiological data suggests a fragile biology, highly susceptible to even mild atmospheric pressure variations outside their native range. Why the silence? Why the adherence to a trajectory that placed them directly within our monitoring fields? It suggests either desperation or a calculated display of intentional significance. The scriptorium house favored the interpretation that maximized political containment. Perhaps, offered a softer, almost lyrical voice from the fringe of the assembly, Elder Lyra of the House of Psionic Resonance, a faction rarely heard in matters of mere material confrontation. It is neither incompetence nor deception, but a fundamental misalignment in axiomatic understanding. We projected our expected framework onto their arrival. What if their method of communication, their concept of strategic engagement, is entirely orthogonal to our established paradigms? Lyra's species had millennia of experience in mapping cognitive dissonances across the void, often finding that the most dangerous species were those whose logic mirrored nothing they understood. Zarthus directed a subtle energy pulse toward the data schematic. The image of the Terran vessel resolved slightly, a blunt, angular construct, undeniably functional but aesthetically crude compared to the flowing, organically grown starships of the hegemony. Their internal data burst, captured moments before they entered passive lockdown, was equally perplexing. Not a formal transmission, but a continuous, highly complex stream of symbolic representation. Images, auditory patterns, complex mathematical sequences interwoven with what appears to be, and the xenolinguists are struggling with the classification, narrative. Narrative, the concept felt profoundly alien. Galactic politics were governed by treaties, energy quotients, and resource allocation. Narrative suggested emotional underpinning, subjective truth, and potential irrationality, all anathema to the hegemony's ordered existence. Narrative is the language of the untrained mind, Consul, Valerius dismissed instantly. It is placeholder data. We must assume hostility until proven otherwise, or more prudently, assume vulnerability and initiate containment protocols for immediate quarantine and interrogation. Their continued silence, even under the threat of systematic disassembly, speaks volumes of their presumed weakness. Livia countered, her tone sharpening. Containment risks escalation. If they possess a mechanism we do not comprehend, if their perceived weakness is merely a camouflage for an asymmetrical advantage, we waste critical reaction time enforcing antiquated security measures. We should initiate measured contact. Force them to communicate on our terms, yes, but avoid the appearance of unprovoked aggression. The Outer Rim worlds watch our first contact protocols closely. Any display of immediate brutality tarnishes the hegemony's claim to galactic stewardship. The debate spiraled, the tension in the vast hall tightening like a drawn bowstring. Fear manifested in the subtle shifts of their biological forms, the increased oscillation of Valerius's dermal filaments, the rigid, almost brittle posture of Livia, the deep, internal processing cycles running within Zarthus himself. They were debating the fate of an unknown entity that had dared to trespass, and the sheer audacity of the intrusion was the most unsettling aspect. They were creatures of vast, systematic power, yet this single, small vessel represented a fracture in their perceived control. Zarthus finally projected a controlling wave through the chamber's ambient field, a silent command that brought the rapid arguments to an abrupt halt. Enough! The Council requires actionable intelligence, not philosophical conjecture or political posturing. The Terran vessel remains stationary, inert, emitting only passive thermal signatures. We will transition to Phase Delta, measured observation and direct engagement. Ambassador Livia, your contingent is best equipped for the initial approach. You will utilize the stealth screening arrays to close the distance without invoking their local sensor nets. Speaker Valerius, you will prepare the quarantine matrices, assuming the worst-case scenario, self-destruction or systemic attack upon proximity. He looked toward the holographic projection of the Terran ship, a speck of defiant metal against the backdrop of interstellar dust. We require understanding. Their arrival suggests either a profound level of desperation or a confidence that borders on arrogance. We shall soon discern which. The transition from high political tension to operational deployment was swift, a hallmark of the hegemony's efficiency once a decision was rendered. Livia, outwardly composed, activated her command sequence. Within moments, the silent, massive geometry of the hegemony's response fleet, ships grown from biometallic substrates and shaped by directed gravity fields, began to shift its configuration around Xylos Prime, a slow, inexorable closing of an aperture around the intruder. Ambassador Livia commanded the Oculus, a reconnaissance vessel layered with advanced sensory apparatus designed for non-invasive data acquisition. As the Oculus approached the Terran craft, gliding through the void with unarving silence, The environmental readings became less confusing and more disconcerting. Proximity report, 1,000 standard units. Livia broadcast to the bridge crew, her voice measured, professional. Their shielding remains offline, passive. Thermal signature is erratic, consistent with a species requiring internal thermoregulation far outside the acceptable median. Life signs are present, densely packed, and exhibiting high metabolic variance. Stress markers are elevated. The sensory data began to stream in greater clarity. The Terran vessel was indeed crewed by galactic standards, riveted plates, visible external conduits, and an external aesthetic that suggested utility prioritized over integrated design. It looked like a temporary shelter hurled into the void, not a vessel of interstellar ambition. Magnify external visual array, focus on hull integrity, ordered the chief observer, a specialist named Kalar, whose entire sensory input was dedicated to pattern recognition. The image resolved. The hull was scarred, not from combat, but from the harshness of lesser space environments. Micrometeoroid pitting, evidence of poorly managed atmospheric reentry burns. It spoke of a species still struggling with the fundamentals of deep space travel, creatures who were perhaps only barely touching the edges of their local system. Kalar analyzed the symbols displayed on their primary hull surface. They are rudimentary etchings, seemingly random. Livia referred to the painted markings the Terrans used for identification and ownership, symbols utterly meaningless to the hegemony's symbolic lexicon. Kalar filtered the visual data through xenolinguistic algorithms, cross-referencing known chaotic linguistic structures. Ambassador, the markings appear to be symbolic representations of their own identification, though the syntax is archaic. More importantly, look at the point of origin. Kalar highlighted a specific section of the hull near the primary drive housing. The material stress fractures around that point are inconsistent with standard wear. They suggest extreme, localized internal pressure spikes, followed by rapid, controlled release. Livia zoomed in, her own bio-optics straining. The stress patterns were indeed localized, almost surgical in their placement. They compensated for a drive failure using rudimentary external patches. Not patched, Ambassador. Repaired, with dissimilar materials. Observe the crystalline structure integration near the port stabilizer. It suggests an immediate, improvised field application of bonding agents under extreme duress, executed with precision that belies the apparent crudity of the external shell. The initial assessment of incompetence was beginning to fray. A species incapable of basic FTL technology should not possess the knowledge, or the calm under pressure, to execute complex field-expedient material science to stabilize a failing drive core while hurtling through hostile space. The internal data stream continues to cycle, Kalar reported, his own apprehension rising. It is still narrative, but the complexity has increased tenfold. It now correlates with our external sensor readings. It is describing their current situation, but utilizing figurative language. They are expressing fear and determination simultaneously through metaphor. Livia felt a chill unrelated to the void's cold. A species that documented its existential dread through poetry while facing the hegemony was deeply unsettling. It implied a level of self-awareness that transcended mere survival instinct. Prepare the boarding shuttle, Kalar. We initiate non-lethal physical contact. We must see the entities that possess such conflicting attributes. Utilize only environmental containment fields and basic translation matrices. Maintain absolute rigidity regarding protocol, no display of perceived deference, but also no immediate threat display. The approach of the smaller shuttle craft, though silent, caused a minuscule fluctuation in the Terran ship's passive energy field. It was the first reaction they had registered since the lockdown. Ambassador, their internal power readings are spiking, not defensively but in preparation for activity, Kalar warned, his voice tight. They are initiating internal sequence locks. They are preparing to react to our approach. Livia watched the schematic display, the tension in the bridge mirroring the rising anxiety in the convocation hall many parsecs away. This was the moment of truth. Would they cower, or would they fight a battle they could not possibly win against the hegemony's technological supremacy? The Terran vessel remained locked down, but a single access hatch near the forward docking pylon hissed open, not depressurizing into vacuum, but sealing itself behind an external layer of shimmering, localized energy. It was a makeshift airlock, constructed externally, an act of profound, immediate engineering defiance. Then the figures appeared, not in a rushing surge, but deliberately, one by one, emerging onto the docking platform of the Hegemony shuttle. They were bipeds, encased in cumbersome, segmented environmental suits that looked heavy and restrictive. Their physiology was overtly fragile, soft, yielding forms encased in hard shells. Physiological scan confirms high internal pressure vulnerability, Valerius noted from the monitoring station back on Xylos Prime, his voice tinged with professional disdain. Their environmental integrity is laughably low-grade. Any breach of their suits would result in immediate systemic failure. They have presented themselves in a state of near-absolute vulnerability. But as the first Terran stood fully exposed on the shuttle's external ramp, there was no trembling, no frantic gesticulation. The figure stood perfectly still, its helmet visor opaque, reflecting the distant, cold light of the Hegemony's approach. Ambassador Livia, the Terran entity, is making a gesture, Kalar reported, his voice a flat monotone of sheer analytical confusion. It is extending an upper manipulator, the hand, palm outward, fingers spread. Our cultural database registers this gesture across several ancient, defunct civilizations as signifying openness or non-aggression. Yet in the context of interstellar first contact, it is almost never utilized. It is too direct. Livia absorbed the data, overriding the inherent expectation of hostile deployment. Maintain distance. Let them hold the posture. The first Terran held the pose for a full minute, an agonizing eternity in the vacuum. Then, slowly, it lowered its arm and reached to its suit interface. Instead of initiating a hail through standard frequency bands, a single, focused beam of coherent light projected from the Terran's wrist interface, locking onto the Oculus shuttle's primary optical sensor. The light was not destructive, it was informational. It bypassed the shuttle's external firewalls, not by brute force, but by mimicking the frequency modulation of the shuttle's own internal diagnostic pulses. Ambassador, they have established a direct, low-bandwidth feed into our optical processing unit, Kalar reported, his voice betraying a flicker of professional admiration masked by alarm. It bypassed all encryption layers as if they were merely standard maintenance queries. How? Analyze the data immediately, Kalar. Do not engage with verbal protocols yet. The feed wasn't an attack, it was a presentation. Thousands of schematics, cultural artifacts, and historical recordings flooded the Oculus bridge, overwhelming the xenolinguists. It was the entirety of recorded human history, distilled into a compressed, efficient data packet, presented in perfect hegemony binary code. It was a data transfer protocol so fast, so fundamentally intuitive, that it suggested they had reverse-engineered hegemony communication architecture merely by passively monitoring local signals. Valerius on Xylos Prime erupted through the long-distance comms channel. This is a vector for infiltration. Consul Zarthus, they are attempting to poison our network with uncontrolled data flow. Terminate the connection. Zarthus's reply was grave, tinged with a strange, new reverence. Negative, Valerius, observe the method. They are not attacking our systems. They are offering a translation key. Kalar, what is the first piece of data they are prioritizing? Kalar's voice was strained. Ambassador, the packet's opening sequence, it is a mathematical proof of universal constants, followed immediately by a complex, self-correcting algorithm for instantaneous environmental shielding against extreme gravitational shear. It demonstrates mastery over localized space-time manipulation that exceeds even our theoretical models for deep field deployment. They are providing us with advanced propulsion theory before they even introduce themselves. Livia felt the carefully constructed edifice of hegemony certainty begin to crack. They had anticipated primitives. They had received unsolicited, advanced physics lectures. Open a secure narrowband communication channel, Livia commanded, her voice regaining its authority, though now tempered by profound caution. Use the formalized low-context response matrix. Acknowledge receipt of the data package. Do not offer analysis. Simply respond. Data acknowledged. We await introduction. The transmission left the Oculus shuttle. The lone Terran figure on the ramp did not move, its stance unchanged. Seconds later, a return signal flashed across the channel. A single word, translated instantly by the hegemony matrix into formal, direct syntax. Understood. The simplicity was devastating. No preamble, no plea, no demand, just a concise confirmation of the established parameter. The remaining Terran entities disembarked, moving with an economy of motion that suggested deep physical conditioning, despite their apparent frailty. They carried no visible weaponry, only small utilitari, and boxes that they placed carefully on the shuttle's outer deck, away from the docking mechanisms. Livia ordered the external environment to be stabilized to near-perfect vacuum conditions around the Terrans, a necessary precaution, but one that demonstrated their dominance. Yet, the Terrans remained unperturbed, their suits maintaining internal integrity without visible strain on their localized power sources. The first Terran, presumably the leader, stepped forward, stopping precisely at the threshold of the Oculus airlock. He did not speak into the external comms. Instead, a soft, modulated voice, perfectly synthesized into the hegemony's dominant language, resonated directly within the shuttle's interior speakers, bypassing the need for external hailing. Ambassador Livia of the Outer Vales, my designation is Commander Elias Thorne, representative of the Unified Terran Directorate. We offer apologies for the unannounced nature of our arrival. Our propulsion matrix suffered a cascade failure near the outer edge of your controlled space. We utilized emergency broadcast protocols to transmit our immediate situational status and relevant theoretical compensation data, predicated on the assumption that any established galactic power would prioritize the dissemination of universal safety knowledge over immediate confrontation. Thorne's voice carried no fear, no subservience, only the quiet authority of someone presenting facts. Back in the Grand Convocation Hall, the atmosphere had shifted from anxious debate to stunned silence. Zarthus studied the incoming translation of Thorne's statement, particularly the operative clause. We utilized emergency broadcast protocols to transmit our immediate situational status and relevant theoretical compensation data. Valerius scoffed, though his conviction was wavering. Compensation data? They are attempting to barter access to their meager knowledge for safe passage. They present basic physics as a gift. Livia's report, relayed immediately, countered Valerius's summation. Consul, I request you review the data integrity logs. Their basic physics contains applications of controlled dark energy resonance that our leading astrophysicists have only hypothesized existed. This is not barter. This is an unsolicited contribution to universal understanding, framed within the context of a survival plea. The juxtaposition was staggering. A species that clearly faced imminent destruction from technological failure, yet whose response to that crisis was not self-preservation at all costs, but the selfless sharing of profound knowledge. Zarthus gave the directive that would define the immediate future of the hegemony's interaction with Sol 3. Ambassador Livia, grant them sealed access to a moderate environment diplomatic chamber. Maintain full containment fields. We will engage in formal dialogue. Valerius, I want the House of Scriptorium to dedicate half its analytical capacity to validating the structural integrity of the Terran-provided propulsion equations. Livia, you are authorized to exchange initial diplomatic courtesies, but nothing of strategic value. We must understand the intent behind this unprecedented ethical display. The cultural chasm yawned wide as Commander Thorne and two accompanying Terran specialists were carefully ushered into a secure processing suite aboard the Oculus. The environment was synthesized to mimic a standard Terran sea-level atmosphere, meticulously calibrated based on the data they had transmitted, a startling demonstration of the hegemony's ability to rapidly integrate new environmental parameters. Thorne removed his helmet first, revealing a face that was asymmetrical by hegemony standards, dominated by two forward-facing primary optical sensors and a highly expressive lower facial structure. He possessed coarse, dark filaments sprouting from his cranial dome, and his exposed skin held a warm, reddish hue. He surveyed the room, not with the typical aggressive scanning common to new species, but with the quiet curiosity of a researcher entering an unfamiliar laboratory. Livia maintained the formal distance dictated by protocol, standing behind a transparent plasteel barrier, her own form radiating faint bioluminescence. Commander Thorne, you have been afforded a secure environment for dialogue. Explain the nature of your species and the precise meaning of your diplomatic outreach. Thorne offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, the gesture the hegemony had noted as acceptance. Ambassador Livia, the Directorate represents the dominant political entity on Sol 3, a planet residing within the lower quadrant of the Orion Arm. Our civilization has only recently achieved the requisite technological maturity to traverse localized space effectively. Our journey was intended to be a controlled, long-duration observation probe toward the galactic core, charting energy fluctuations. The drive failure necessitated a deviation into your charted space. And the data transmission, Livia pressed, her voice devoid of inflection. The unsolicited exchange of advanced physics formulae while facing potential annihilation. Thorne paused, selecting his words with painstaking care. Ambassador, we operate under a foundational principle we call the interconnected imperative. The universe is fundamentally a system of shared information potential. To hoard knowledge that could prevent disaster, even a disaster external to one's own immediate political sphere, is an act of entropy against the collective whole. We perceived your established technological signature as indicative of a mature, established power structure. If we possessed a key to universal stability, it was our obligation to offer it, irrespective of immediate outcome for ourselves. Our survival is secondary to the integrity of the overarching informational substrate. The hegemony, whose political philosophy was built on stratified resource control and the careful hoarding of proprietary technologies, struggled profoundly with this concept. Valerius's voice crackled with disbelief over the long-range link. This is transparent moralizing, a deliberate attempt to confuse strategic advantage with altruistic folly. Livia ignored him, focusing solely on Thorne. Commander, this interconnected imperative seems entirely divorced from self-preservation. If you are capable of such advanced theoretical understanding, why does your technology display such crude implementation externally? Why the reliance on physical bonds and visible stress fractures? Thorne smiled faintly, a complex shifting of facial musculature that the hegemony catalogued as mild amusement mixed with resignation. Ambassador, you are witnessing the true face of Terran development. We achieved theoretical comprehension of deep space mechanics millennia ago, through intense, non-collaborative scientific endeavors. Our physics evolved faster than our industrial and ethical infrastructure. For centuries, we possessed the knowledge of the stars, but lacked the social cohesion, the shared will, to build the necessary vessels reliably and ethically on a large scale. The craft you intercepted is a testament to that gap. It is a barely functional shell housing a mind that understands generalized relativity better than it understands unified mass production. He gestured toward the small crates he had placed on the deck. Those boxes contain the schematics for the application of the data we sent you, our most advanced field engineering solutions, designed to rapidly translate theoretical advantage into practical, durable hardware. They represent the culmination of the last century of Terran industrial integration. We offer this as a gesture of good faith, a down payment on understanding. The implication was monumental. Humanity had spent an epoch with the answers but lacked the collective maturity to build the door. Now, facing extinction, they were offering the keys to the door and the ability to build a better lock to the first civilization they met. The Council convened an emergency session, diverting nearly all processing power to validating the Terran data streams. The initial assessment returned by the Scriptorium House was not political condemnation, but mathematical awe. Consul, Valerius announced, his voice devoid of its earlier venom, replaced by something akin to terror. The Terran propulsion solution, the controlled resonance cascade, it is flawless. If implemented on hegemony drive cores, it would increase thrust efficiency by a factor of 300% while simultaneously requiring only 1/10 the current energy allocation. It renders our current interstellar capabilities obsolete overnight. Livia, still in proximity to Thorne, relayed this information through a direct feed. Thorne simply inclined his head. We hoped it would be useful. Useful? Valerius sputtered across the gulf of space. Commander, your arrival constitutes the single greatest technological inflection point in the known history of the hegemony. You present us with the means to transcend our current boundaries, and you do so while being entirely dependent on our mercy. This was the psychological pivot. Humanity was not demanding parity, they were offering superiority as an act of abstract principle. Zarthus addressed Livia, his voice carrying a deep philosophical weight that silenced the entire council chamber. Ambassador, question the commander regarding the ethical burden of this knowledge. If they possess such knowledge, why would they not use it to dominate their local sphere, to ensure their own survival first? Why this immediate, profound surrender of advantage? Livia posed the query to Thorn. Commander, the hegemony is structured around the acquisition and maintenance of strategic advantage. Your species offers absolute advantage freely. Why? What is the Terran calculation that dictates planetary survival is less important than dissemination of theoretical physics to a potentially adversarial entity? Thorn met Livia's gaze, the environmental filtration unit humming softly between them. Ambassador, you perceive the universe as a zero-sum contest for resources and dominance. We have moved beyond that framework, or rather, we are moving beyond it. The greatest threats to intelligent life are not usually external aggressors, but internal systemic failures. The inability to manage complexity, the collapse under internal contradiction, the destruction born of ignorance. He took a measured breath. When we analyzed the galactic data available to us before leaving our system, the faint, ancient signals we detected, we saw cycles of rise and fall, of vast empires that achieved technological mastery only to destroy themselves through the isolationist hoarding of crucial knowledge. The hegemony, with its defined structure and reliance on hierarchy, is mathematically vulnerable to eventual, unforeseen systemic stasis. The Terran species, being chaotic, deeply individualistic, and profoundly adaptable, has learned that our only true long-term survival lies in universally accessible solutions. Therefore, Thorn concluded, his voice steady, we do not trade for survival. We offer the infrastructure for universal stability. If your hegemony integrates this, you become a stabilizing force rather than a localized power node. If you reject it and destroy us, the knowledge dies with us, and the next minor cosmological event that destabilizes your current drive matrix will lead to the same collapse you fear in us. Our logic is simple. Shared knowledge ensures universal robustness. Isolation guarantees eventual decay. The implications settled heavily in the room. Humanity was not merely a powerful species. They were an ethical firewall against galactic self-destruction, weaponized by their own chaotic, yet deeply moral internal structure. The convocation hall dissolved into quiet, intense consultation. The houses of order and stability were shaken to their core. Their entire political economy was based on the scarcity of advantage. Humanity offered abundance. Zarthus made his final assessment. Livia, inform the commander that the hegemony accepts the gift. We require technical integration teams immediately. We will offer safe harbor and full resources for the repair and refitting of the Terran vessel, and for the establishment of a formal diplomatic embassy on Xylos Prime. Thorn inclined his head again. We thank you for your measured response, Consul Zarthus. We accept the terms of safe harbor. The act of contact had passed. Humanity, underestimated as a volatile primitive threat, had instead revealed itself as a repository of stabilizing truth, offering the key to galactic efficiency in exchange for mere safe passage. The immediate conflict was averted, replaced by a profound, challenging symbiosis. Weeks passed in a whirl of unprecedented activity on Xylos Prime. Hegemony engineers, utilizing Terran guidance, began the agonizing process of integrating the new resonance cascade technology into their massive dreadnoughts. The speed of integration, directed by the two silent Terran specialists who rarely left Thorn's side, was astonishing. They moved with an instinctual understanding of material science that bypassed hegemony computational redundancy. Commander Thorn, meanwhile, engaged in continuous dialogue with Livia and Zarthus, focusing on socio-political frameworks rather than technology. He sought to understand the hegemony's rigid structure, explaining human concepts of decentralized governance and adaptive law, concepts that felt dangerously chaotic to the hegemony's core sensibilities. During one such dialogue, held in a specially constructed, heavily monitored viewing gallery overlooking the great planetary defense grid, Livia finally breached the subject that still gnawed at the hegemony's foundational insecurity. Commander Thorn, she began, observing the massive energy conduits Thorn's team had installed to manage the resonance fields. Your species possesses the intellectual capacity to solve universal problems, yet you nearly extinguished yourselves in localized conflicts barely a century prior to your FTL capability. How do you reconcile such profound, internal violence with the principle of the interconnected imperative? Thorn stood by the viewport, watching the automated construction drones weave the intricate, new patterns of energy projection across the system's defenses. Ambassador, you perceive our history as contradiction. We perceive it as necessary struggle. The human mind, when unconstrained, is inherently capable of both profound cruelty and profound empathy. The era you observed, our period of significant internal conflict, was the crucible through which we forged the ability to prioritize objective truth over subjective tribalism. It was a necessary, painful self-culling. He turned to face her, his expression intensely serious. We did not emerge from that chaos united by divine revelation or external force. We unified because we discovered repeatedly and brutally that the technologies we were developing, the capacity for planetary destruction, demanded a higher level of ethical consensus to manage. The choice was simple: mutual annihilation through disagreement or unified advancement through shared principle. The interconnected imperative is not an inherent trait. It is a survival mechanism we engineered for ourselves, hammered out in the fire of our own potential extinction. Livia processed this. The hegemony's peace was imposed by systemic authority. Humanity's peace was earned through surviving internal self-immolation. You risked everything to offer us this knowledge, Livia stated, seeking the core truth. What precisely is the long-term strategic objective of the Directorate beyond stabilization? Thorne walked toward a console displaying the latest telemetry from the newly integrated hegemony drives. Our objective is exploration, Ambassador. Not conquest, not resource extraction, but comprehension. We seek the boundaries of the cosmos, not the boundaries of political spheres. He brought up a complex projection, not a map of known hegemony space, but a three-dimensional visualization of the galactic halo, far beyond the regulated territories. Within this visualization, there was a faint, almost imperceptible pattern of residual energy signatures, repeating across immense distances in perfect, non-random sequences. This is why we broadcast it immediately, Thorne continued, pointing to the signature cluster. The knowledge we offered you, the resonance cascade, is critical but not for local supremacy. It is necessary for a deeper journey. What is this structure? Livia whispered, recognizing the sheer scale of the projection. It mapped out structures too vast for hegemony engineering to conceive of building. We detected this pattern, the echo signature, 3 decades ago, using experimental deep space telemetry array that required nearly all of our unified planetary energy budget to run. It is a signal, Ambassador. Not communication, but a residual imprint of organized energy, distributed across the void in a mathematically profound, non-naturalistic lattice. It is ancient, vast, and it is accelerating its informational output. Thorne overlaid a temporal projection. The echo signature was increasing in its complexity and velocity of signal release, as if a colossal, dormant machine was slowly waking up, or perhaps suffering a catastrophic, accelerating failure. The Terran Directorate believes this echo signature originates from a pre-galactic civilization, entities whose mastery of physics surpassed even our theoretical understanding of your resonance cascade. We believe they created something immense, something that spans the gulfs between nebulae, and that whatever it is now reaching a critical state. Livia felt the chill return, far deeper than the vacuum's cold. The hegemony had been concerned with terrestrial expansion, political control over neighboring sectors, and the management of their established client states. They had viewed themselves as the pinnacle of galactic stewardship. Thorne had just revealed that they were infants playing with local energy sources, while a colossal, silent entity far beyond their comprehension was entering a phase transition, a change that could rewrite the fundamental constants of physics in their sector. If this is true, Commander, Livia managed, struggling to frame the political implications for the convocation. If there is a threat of this magnitude, why did the hegemony not detect it in its thousands of years of systemic monitoring? Thorne looked out at the vast, controlled starscape of Xylos Prime, now humming with the unprecedented power of human-integrated drives. Because, Ambassador, you were monitoring based on the expected signatures of your peers. You looked for threats that followed known protocols of conquest, expansion, and localized energy competition. The echo signature is not hostile in the way you understand hostility. It is a vast, cosmic process, and detecting it requires a sensitivity to background noise that only a species constantly wrestling with its own chaotic internal noise, a species that learned to listen to the static between signals, could develop. He looked at Livia, his human eyes clear and serious. We did not come here begging for mercy, Ambassador. We came here because we had information critical to the survival of this entire sector against a threat that does not care about hegemony law or Terran philosophy. We brought you the technology to allow your fleets to react at the necessary velocity, and we brought you the map to the threat itself. The slow, atmospheric buildup of political tension dissolved into a single, unified, existential dread. The initial conflict, the hegemony's arrogance versus Huma. Niddy's perceived weakness was revealed as a distraction. Livia immediately sent a prioritized, heavily encrypted transmission back to Consul Zarthus, bypassing standard diplomatic layers. It carried only two components, a confirmation of the Echo signature's existence and the final, unassailable truth of Terran motivation. Consul, the Terrans did not come seeking to conquer or even to ally for mutual benefit as we understand it. They came to compel unity by presenting a challenge that dwarfs all prior political considerations. They are not a threat. They are a catalyst. Their ethics are not noble folly. They are a function of their survival architecture in the face of inevitable complexity. We are no longer masters of our fate in this sector. We are merely partners in a crisis that has been silently unfolding for epochs. Commander Thorne stood beside the console, no longer a supplicant or an intruder, but a necessary component of the coming reaction. He pointed to the accelerating lattice on the projection. We have stabilized your immediate kinetic capabilities, Ambassador. Now, we must learn how to build defenses capable of weathering a force that exists on a scale you have yet to define. The era of localized imperial politics is over. The true frontier has just announced itself. The Grand Convocation Hall, now operating under the shared, terrifying clarity of the Echo signature, saw the last vestiges of petty political posturing vanish. Valerius, Livia, and Zarthus, representatives of ancient, divergent philosophies, looked upon the same ancient signal, a cosmic imperative demanding immediate, total convergence. The fragile, chaotic humans had delivered not technology to fight a war, but the very foundational requirement for the next stage of galactic existence, the ability to cooperate against a threat that rendered sovereignty meaningless. The journey outward, catalyzed by a near-fatal navigational error, had just begun.